Hello everybody, it's Stinky here again. Just coming back to do some cards and castles as usual. Um, I may branch out into some other games, but not anytime soon. There's still a bunch of stuff that I'd like to do with the channel as is. One of the things that I keep asking myself is, and I've asked around as well, is what do you guys want to see on this channel? Like, what do you want me to cover? I've had some ideas for things that I want to cover. For example, I want to cover building a couple more decks, as a couple of control decks, as well as maybe a control deck and an aggro deck, to show my thought process as when it comes to building each kind of deck. I've also thought about doing a series of highlighting either user submitted decks or decks from the forums, building them, talking about them for a minute, and then either on camera or off camera playing, I don't know, like 10 games with it or so, really getting a feel for how the deck works, and then offering some suggestions, cards that I would cut, cards that I would add, that kind of stuff. Really just kind of give my feedback on what it looks like, so you guys can get an idea about what cards are good, what cards are bad. Sorry, I'm just kind of flipping through these. It doesn't make for very appealing visuals. But what I decided I wanted to do on this video is I want to redo my Viking card breakdown. I've been meaning to do it for a little while now. I just don't feel like I gave it really the time it deserved. As well as, it was one of my first ones. I mean, neutral, there wasn't very many neutral units. I'm reasonably happy with the way that one turned out. And even though the Crusader one is faster, I'm reasonably happy with the way that one turned out as well. I don't think I droned on, but I also don't think I spent too much time either. But with the Viking one, I skipped over a lot of cards. So what I want to do is I kind of want to redo the Viking video. And I know people are going to watch this one, so comment down below or send me a message on the forums or in-game add me something and let me know. Sorry, I had weird hiccups again. And let me know exactly what you guys want to see on this channel, what you want me to showcase, highlight. I know I get recommendations for more guides, but what do you want a guide about? What do you want me to write a guide about? I'll be more than happy to do it. But a lot of the stuff, as far as gameplay, you're gonna pick up on the more that you watch, and the more that I explain the moves that I'm doing. And I might not be doing a good enough job at that today, but the more that I explain the moves that I'm doing and the reasons that I'm making the decisions that I'm making, and what my point is, you're gonna improve your game as well if you put some of those concepts into practice. So tell me what you want me to, if you want me to make more guides, tell me what you want me to make guides about. If you want me to show more draft games, more regular constructed games, you want me to highlight this, that, the other stuff, let me know what you want to see. As you can see, my shards are a little bit higher as well. That's because I've been doing some tournaments off camera. I had a 9-win, 1-loss tournament before I drafted this one. I just kind of want to get the last two cards that I need and get them out of the way. Plus, it gives me something to do, and I don't have to wait on doing my drafts until I'm recording. Obviously, this deck is not that great. But you kind of get stuck with what you get stuck with. This deck sucks, but I don't know. Maybe I'll win a few more games with it, at least get my money back. And I just want to get those witch doctors out of the way. Obviously, I'm pretty close to getting the first one. You know what? I'll just get the first one real quick. Let's just buy standard packs. Where are you at? I want to leave me at least enough to draft one more time. So, what are we getting? 2 packs. Let's go. Courthouse, Veil of the Assassin, Rite of Fire, Flashlight, Wings of Valkyrie. Bleh. Alright, and Stance of the Fierce Tiger, Sensei, Pyromancer, Battle Hardened, Stance of the Fierce Tiger again. But alright, that should give me enough cards to get one. Yay. Alright, let's show you how crafting works. Obviously, I would never disenchant anything unless you already have 2 of. Push that cleanup button, it'll take care of it for you. Unless you don't like your foils. If you don't like foils, you can disenchant these for a reasonable amount of shards. This is just a standard common. It gives you 100 shards. Rares give you 400 shards. Epics give you... Epics give you... Epics give you 2,000 shards, and legendaries give you 8,000 shards. So if you don't like your foils, you can get rid of those. Oh, I don't want a foil Witch Doctor. They cost 8,000 to make. And I have a lot of epics, and I crafted a lot of epics, but we're going to get one of these guys. I don't know. You never know. I might play them. Well, I've got 19 shards left, but my collection score went up. Yay. So, okay. Back to the Viking cards. Just to scroll through these, as you can see, I do have all of them. Again, 2 of everything. We're going to go through this, go through these. I'm going to touch on every single one of these. This is going to be a long video. It's probably going to be the longest one because of all the droning that I did at the beginning. And then here's the foils. I'm missing Brynjolf's Big Bash and the AOD foils, and I think that's it. I think those are the only foils that I'm missing. Aeroth. Yeah, I think I've got them all except for Brynjolf's Big Bash. Yep, there's Brynjolf's Big Bash. I don't have that. And I don't have the AOD foils. I've got a couple, but those are just ones that I happen to open. But yeah, so there we go. So I guess we'll take it from the top here. We'll touch on these first 2 cards at the same time. This is Battle Harden. This is Blessing of the Treants. They do the same thing, but they have a different target. They're permanent buffs. What a buff is, it's a spell that gives a stat increase. I like to call these enchantments when I play. I've played Magic the Gathering for forever. They're not auras, they're enchantments. Enchant creatures. And essentially just enchantments, and that's what I like. That's what I usually call these, where I call this a buff. In this an enchantment. That's just the way that I do it in my head anyway. When I'm looking at them, but sometimes I just call them all buffs. But for practical reasons, this is a enchantment and this is a buff. But let's touch on these 2. This is Battle Harden and this is Blessing of the Treants. They're essentially enchantments that do the same thing but with different targets sometimes. The Battle Harden gives a unit with 4 or less max health +3/+3, where Blessing of the Treants gives a unit with 2 or less movement +3/+3. So, in theory, you could use both of these on the same unit. Let's say you had a Sea Witch, right? You could throw Battle Harden on it, raise its max health, make it a 4/5, throw another Battle Harden on it, make it a 9/8, and then throw 2 Blessing of the Treants on it and make it really, really, really big, and then just hope nobody, murders it or kills it in any way. But Battle Harden and Blessing of the Treants. Battle Harden sees a little bit more play because, and I guess you might even be able to tell in the picture, I'm not sure exactly what unit that is that's covered in ice crystals. But it looks kind of like Master of Arms, a grumpy Master of Arms to me. And that's where this card's used the most. So this sees a lot more play because he does combo so well with Master of Arms. You could play Master of Arms at for 4 and then play Battle Harden for 0 to make Master of Arms a 7/7 double striker, which is a pretty big threat. Usually opponents are going to kill it, but you're usually going to get your value out of it. If you can make Battle Harden work, it's not bad. The 3/3 buff is pretty big. And since it's permanent, it makes your opponent have to trade up in order to kill weaker units, but then you're losing 2 cards. So it's really a give and take. And the same thing with Blessing of the Treants. This gets played a little bit less, but this is useful on things like Shield Knight, on things like Stalker, on ranged units, pretty much all of them. You can make them really powerful. So Battle Harden and Blessing of the Treants, they can be useful, but they need to be in the right deck, and you need to make sure that you're trading properly. Keep in mind that when you play one of these enchantments on a unit, that unit is effectively worth 2 cards, and when that unit is destroyed, you're going to lose some card advantage if you only took one thing down with it. So keep that in mind when you play these cards, that's effectively what they're doing. Now, a different perspective, this is Burst of Strength. You can just give a unit +3 attack this turn, and that's just a one-shot buff. Usually these are used to kill off units that are bigger than your guy. So if you have something that's going to be a problem for you, you can play something like Burst of Strength and trade with it. You'd be trading 2 of your cards for 1 of theirs, but if that card was a bigger threat or is hit with a buff or something like that, it can be an even trade. These can also be used to buff a unit to hit a castle or a building in order to get that last bit of finishing damage in. Generally speaking, I like these better because I look at these as situational removal cards, especially some of the other ones we're going to cover a little bit later, where they're situationally murder. Where they're Vikings version of removal spells. They require a unit in the right position in order to make use of, but they do their job. You can get a lot of value out of some of these cards. This is one of the weaker ones, I believe. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this used to give 1 knockback back in the day. That was before melee units retaliated when they were destroyed. So this card used to see play because melee units didn't ever retaliate when they were destroyed. So you'd kill a unit and I think you'd knock it back anyway. But even if you didn't, it wouldn't retaliate because you killed it. So Burst of Strength used to see a lot of play. There are better cards than this right now. I would almost even consider playing one of these other 2 previous cards to this one, because at least these are permanent. Even though your card would be worth 2, they can be used effectively the same. The enchantments generally have a little bit more utility than the buffs do, because they're permanent. So again, there's better choices than Burst of Strength, but if you're really limited, this isn't horrible. Cold Blast. This is a card. And if you watched my previous Vikings videos, I'm actually reasonably fond of this card. In tournament mode, people have a tendency to play Suit of Armor, although I've seen it around a little bit less. Maybe that means people are watching my videos. But Suit of Armor is just the worst card in existence, other than probably Drake Shouldn't Dance. But Suit of Armor is terrible. You can combo it and make it kind of useful, but for the most part it just sits there and doesn't do anything. Hitting a Suit of Armor with a Cold Blast, if it's in the right position, can knock the Suit of Armor directly behind your opponent's castle, and then they will never be able to get rid of it ever. So it'll sit there, be a nuisance to your opponent for the entire game, and do nothing. That's really the big use out of this card. It used to be able to knock your units as well, but the developers found that to be a little bit too strong to give Vikings a significant movement buff like that, so they got rid of that part of it. Cold Blast can be useful. I'd play it in tournament mode. I wouldn't play it in constructed. There's just better cards that do better stuff for better than this one. But in tournament, if you don't have a better pick, Cold Blast would be very useful. Plus, it can keep a pesky unit away from your base, and it can knock a unit into getting a really nasty lightning combo. So it can find its uses, but there's better cards that do the same thing, but better. Cold Geyser, this card's the worst. It doesn't do anything. You put it in your opponent's base, and it deals 1 damage to everything and freezes everything nearby. This card would be useful if your opponent wasn't allowed to attack it. Then you could put it there and it would be a real nuisance. But since your opponent can just attack it and kill it, it's not a problem. It might deal 1, maybe would deal 1 damage to your opponent's base before something walks up and just kills it. Totally useless. Don't play it ever. Drake Shouldn't Dance, another totally useless card. If you look at even the weakest Drake, which is Spirit Drake, you'll notice that has 3 health. And Drake's Shouldn't Dance deals 2 damage to all enemy Drakes. So this doesn't kill anything. It just weakens some Drakes. And that's it. It doesn't even do it to dragons, just Drakes. 2 damage is totally worthless. I would pick anything else. I might even pick Pillar of Annoyance instead of Drake Shouldn't Dance, because at least Pillar of Annoyance costs 0. And your opponents need to attack it to get rid of it, where that's a time where they're not attacking one of your guys. Drake Shouldn't Dance. Never play this card. It's awful. Shockwave. This card can be moderately useful. I may make a deck that has a Shockwave combo in it. We'll see how it goes. But Shockwave can be useful. This is kind of taking the place of what Cold Blast used to be. It can knock friendly units towards your opponent's base. It can knock enemy units away from your opponent's base, but it only deals 1 damage, so it doesn't kill them. You're only using this for the movement utility, and it can move things up and down as well, which I wish Vikings had a wind card that moved units vertically, but they don't. Hopefully that's something that they create in the next expansion, because you'd be able to do some cool stuff by moving units vertically. But you can't right now, you can only move them horizontally. But Shockwave is one of the few cards that can move things vertically as a spell, and it, generally speaking, isn't that great. It can be useful to try to surprise your opponent by rushing something in their base. There's a card that just does this better than Shockwave, and it doesn't require a unit in the 2 units in the right position to make it work. Shockwave, just not that great. Don't play it. Storm Strike. This card used to be super overpowered, then it was super underpowered, then it was super overpowered again, and now it's underpowered again. Chain 2 is not that great. Compare this to Burst of Strength. Storm Strike's probably better because you can get the 2 damage on multiple targets. Even if you hit 2 targets, you'll be dealing a net more damage. However, that's situationally useful because if it doesn't kill the unit but it weakens it, that unit was already going to die to something anyway, so it's just going to look to trade itself off to something and create some value. This can be useful if you're looking to destroy some weakened buildings or something like that. I guess if you don't really have anything else to play, Storm Strike wouldn't be a bad choice. But now that they kind of changed the way that debuffs stack, like by debuffs I mean stuff like dirty fighting, I mean stuff like bleed, that kind of stuff, the synergy with the pirates. This doesn't have as much use, although it can combo with corrosive poison. So if your opponent poisons the base and then you use a lightning thing to attack it, then the poison will be affected by the lightning. But 2 is just not enough in order to dedicate a card. And this isn't permanent. It used to be not permanent, and then it was permanent, and then it was not permanent. This card's been changed a bunch of times. This iteration of Storm Strike's just not that great. Vortex. This card's terrible. I can't believe another person who will remain anonymous, Nordium, picked this in his tournament deck for some god-awful reason. This card just doesn't do anything. Deals 2 damage to a unit and pulls it 2 spaces towards your side. Unless you're going to hit that unit with a ranged attack, or the 2 damage kills it, or you need to put it in position for a ridiculous lightning combo with a ton of stuff on the field. Vortex just doesn't do anything. It's not going to kill any units in the game other than a Soulless Lantern and a Rat token. That's it. Other than that, it won't kill a unit. It'll just pull it 2 spaces towards your side, and if you're attacking that unit with a melee unit, you're going to be retaliated against, assuming your guy doesn't have a knockback. So the next card is going to be way better than this one. And effectively do the same thing. So, to touch on Wings of the Valkyrie, I like this card a lot better. It pulls a friendly unit 2 spaces towards your side, and you get to draw a card. So, let's say you had a Berserker, and you used Vortex to suck a unit to you so you don't have to get into their side of the field to kill it, and then attacked it with the Berserker, it would kill it. Or, you could run that Berserker up to that unit, attack that unit, kill it, and then retreat your unit back with Wings of the Valkyrie, and they would end up in the same square. So, unless that 2 damage is that important to you, it's not. Vortex is terrible. Where Wings of the Valkyrie at least draws you a card that replaces itself. So if you need a cantrip or something like that, Wings of the Valkyrie will do it for you. And you can get some decent use out of this thing. But usually this isn't played. There's better stuff. But Vikings are really lacking on the draw side of the game. So if you want draw spells, this is going to be your guy. Avalanche. This is a card that is moderately useful. Again, not that great. 2 damage just isn't enough for anything. 2 damage kills nothing. It can bring a building out into threat radius and be to take it down a really nasty building. But Vikings are not really concerned with opponents' buildings. They have better ways to deal with them than with Avalanche. It just doesn't do enough. Yeah, it's nice to reposition your opponent's stuff, but if the repositioning just doesn't do anything for you, then why bother? And that's about how I feel about with Avalanche. Why bother? Again, this is a strict upgrade from Vortex, by the way, because this Avalanche can target buildings as well. Vortex cannot target buildings, but it's a 1 gold that you generally won't care about, especially if you want that terrible effect. Vortex and Avalanche, don't play them. Wings of the Valkyrie, if you need the draw card, you play it. Otherwise, there's better stuff. Brinjol's Blessing, touch on the first legendary in Vikings, gives a unit that already has knockback +4/+4. What that means is a unit that already has knockback is going to be things like Brinjolf. It's going to be things like Ragnar. It's going to be things like Berserker, or it's going to be something that you buffed with a spell that gives a unit knockback, like a Wind Weapon. So it's situational what you can target, but that buff is huge. The 4/4 is probably I want to say the biggest static enchantment that you can give a unit. This is permanent. It makes that unit a massive threat no matter what you throw this on, but it is very situational what you're allowed to target with it, similar to Battle Hardened Blessing of the Treants. It's very situational what you can strap this to, but whatever you strap it to is going to be a monster. Brinjol's Blessing, not that great as far as legendary cards are concerned, but if you're looking for an enchantment that's going to do a ton of damage and be an instant impact, hitting a unit that your opponent's not expecting you to hit with something like Brinjol's Blessing is going to be pretty nasty. Keep in mind that if you give a unit something that gives it temporary knockback, where it's not going to have knockback all the time, like something like Might of the Minotaur that also gives knockback, you can throw Brinjol's Blessing on that unit, and when the Might of the Minotaur knockback goes away, Brinjol's Blessing stays, but the unit will not have knockback. So keep that in mind. That's kind of a way to get a little bit more utility out of this card. It's decent, but it's not that great. Call to War, we touched on this a little bit when we went over Flower Knight, or whatever, Night of the Flowers. It gives all your units +1/+1. Night of the Flowers just a billion times better. It completely replaces this card. I wouldn't play this at all. Even in tournament, this card is moderately useful. You can play Armory, and that's way better than this. You can play Night of the Flowers, and that's way better than this. You can play Massive Arms, and that's way better than this. You can play just about anything else that's not this. If you want to give all of your units +1/+1, you might as well play anything else. It's just not that great. Don't play Call to War. Cloak of Protection. This is your the next draw card that you can get for Vikings. Again, it's situational. You need to give a unit +1/+1 a draw card. I actually kind of like this card. I like it better than Magic Cutlass. I found a lot of success playing Cloak of Protection on my Treant. Having the defender of my base having 5 attack as opposed to 4, very important in a lot of matchups, as well as, giving it that 1 extra health, plus it replaces itself, so you'll be able to filter through the cards you actually need later in the game. So Cloak of Protection's super useful. But at the same time, you really wish it only costed 1. The fact that it costs 2, it doesn't seem like a huge difference, but it is. This card just feels clunky almost every time that you play it. You're almost always going to be playing something other than Cloak of Protection. So this card just feels clunky in a lot of matchups, and it doesn't feel like it really gets the power that it deserves. So if you need the draw, play it. If you're wondering if you have a couple extra empty deck slots, play it. Other than that, don't play. God, why am I burping so much? Frost Strike. This card's not good at all. Play Burst of Strength instead of this card. They essentially do the same thing, but this inflicts freeze. If you're attacking a unit and you're not killing it, even with the +3 attack buff, you've got a problem anyway. The freeze isn't going to do anything with a card like this. You can't spread that freeze debuff through lightning anymore, so Frost Strike is just totally useless. If you want this card, play Burst of Strength instead, because if you're buffing a unit up and need to give it +3 attack in order to kill another unit, which is the only thing that freeze affects, it doesn't affect buildings or anything like that, you're probably going to kill that unit, and if you don't, you have a bigger problem anyway. Frost Strike, just don't play it ever. Even if you want to play a card like this, play Burst of Strength instead. This card is not good. Alright, Hall of Winds. This card used to be good, and then it wasn't good, and then it was good again, and now it's not good again. This card used to give all your units knockback, and then they got rid of that a while ago, and then they changed the way retaliation works, and this card's seen a few changes as well. This iteration of it's not great. If you really have the offensive, Hall of Winds can be a real thorn in your opponent's side. It makes it very difficult for your opponents to work up. I actually may build a deck around this card because I can see potential in it, but most of the time when you play this card, it's just going to be underwhelming. So be prepared to be disappointed. Be prepared for your opponent to be able to attack your base and then Hall of Winds blow it back and blow it out of threat radius. So then you won't be able to kill it and then, have it run back in and attack your base, and Hall of Winds will blow it back and then you won't be able to kill it, and the cycle goes on and on. So Hall of Winds can be very disappointing. However, if you're really on the offensive, Hall of Winds can be a huge asset because it'll keep opponents' units from getting anywhere near your base. It'll save you a little bit of time as well. If your opponent stops your offensive and starts to be on the attack, it'll save you a turn or two and potentially give you something to defend yourself. But Hall of Winds, for the most part, don't play this card. Used to be good, now it's not. Rampage, this card can be cute. You can combo this with some decent stuff. If you shockwave a unit into your opponent's base, it'll damage it by 1. You can throw Rampage on it and deal double strike. That can be pretty good. Just keep in mind that if you're going to double strike something, unless it's a ranged unit, you're going to want to be double striking the castle. You're not going to get a huge value out of a damaged unit with double strike because keep in mind your unit's already damaged. So if you attack something and it retaliates against you, it's probably going to kill you before you get a chance to use that second strike. So when you use Rampage, you're definitely going to want to take that unit, throw it at the castle, but whatever the attack power it is, essentially think of it as doubled. If your unit's damaged. So let's say you have the Smithy, which is the next card here, a 3/3 unit. It's damaged down to 2/3. You throw Rampage on it, it effectively makes it a 6/3, although it will combo things like Lightning twice with its attacks. So it can be cute that way, a little bit better than Demonic Rage. But Rampage, you really need to be aggressive to play this card. And a lot of times your units just die in one attack anyway, based on the way that retaliation works now, as well as the other word that I'm looking for. So just kind of keep that in mind. One of the things that you can do with this card is if your opponent leaves an opening to his base and there's a guy right next to it, you can walk your guy up right in front of the base. You can attack a unit, destroy it, play Rampage, and then attack the base. At least that way you're threatening something and you turn it into a removal spell. But just keep in mind Rampage, situationally useful. Touch on Smithy again. This is the support unit for Vikings. This gives a friendly unit +1 attack. Generally speaking, that +1 attack is not that great. This is probably the least useful of the support units that are available. So giving a friendly unit +1 attack, not so good. As far as a body goes, like in tournament, he's reasonably useful just because the 3/3 body for 2 is pretty good. Compare this to something like Peasant Militia or Soulless Lantern. The stat line's a little bit better, but they'll still trade. And he's a 2-drop, so compared to Lumberjack and Bear, he's just worse. But that +1 attack can be situationally useful, but in Vikings, you're almost always going to find something better to play than Smithy, like Warrior. Alright, touch on Swirling Ice, another terrible card. 2 damage is just not enough damage for any spell to deal to anything. 2 damage is just not enough, and not only that, you have to have your units around them, and then the freeze, like, come on, man, this card is not so good. If it gave like 2 damage Great Cleave Lightning were bursted all around you and then chained to everything, Swirling Ice would be great, but then it would be called Swirling Lightning and not Swirling Ice. This iteration of it's not good. 2 damage isn't enough to do to anything. Freezing the enemies just doesn't really do anything either. At least not anymore. It used to when Ice Weaver was good, but now it sucks. The ice, no, just don't play Swirling Ice. There's just so much better stuff that you could play, like anything else. Warrior, this is your standard 2-drop unit for Vikings. If you're playing Vikings, you're almost always going to be playing 2 Warriors. He does have Cleave, so he can hit multiple targets with the same attack, which is really good if you're combining it with stuff like really anything. If you throw some nice buffs on it, he can kill more than one unit at a time with the buff to really get some value out of himself. If you're playing ninjas, you really need to have units that can hit more than one target at a time because they are lacking in so many of their other departments. Warriors are a good fit for that. It can hit the castle and buildings at the same time. It can hit 2 units at the same time. It can hit up to 5 things in the same attack. So Warrior can dish out a lot of damage. That 5 health is pretty standard for a 2-drop unit. So Warrior is a little lacking on the attack power. He used to have knockback, but when they changed the retaliation, they also had to change Warrior. He would be too strong. But Warrior is quite good if you're playing Vikings. This is going to be your 2-drop compared to Flying Books and Imp. Warrior does his job. Winds of the Ice Sea. Pushes all enemies 5 spaces away. This card used to draw a card and cost more. Now it only costs 2 and doesn't draw a card anymore. Since it doesn't draw a card anymore, it's totally worthless. Pushing all enemies 5 spaces away can set up some lightning combos. It'll keep you from getting killed, but wouldn't you want something that's going to keep you from getting killed, actually keep you from getting killed? This is just a lose slower card. It's just going to make all your opponent's units rush back forward, and you're going to have really no time to set up a defense when they're rushing an even bigger army on you once they get after their next turn. Winds of the Ice Sea is very underwhelming. Don't play it. The next card is just a billion times better. Touch on Winds of the North. I love this card. I think this card should see way, way, way more play than it does today. Winds of the North is awesome for a couple of reasons. Number 1, it pushes all enemies away 2 spaces from your side. Number 2, it can clump enemies together if they don't have 2 spaces to move in order to set up lightning chains. And number 3, it moves your units 2 spaces towards the enemy side, which means you can get in to attack the base or set up a lightning combo or win, from 2 squares farther away than what your opponent's expecting. Nobody ever expects to see Winds of the North. When they see Winds of the North and you kill them with it, they're always like, oh man, how was I supposed to play around Winds of the North? You weren't. You just have to hope that your opponent doesn't have this card. And if they do have this card, you're dead. So Winds of the North is fantastic. I think this should be played in way more decks than it is today. It doesn't do any damage, but the movement buff that it gives to your units in Vikings is fantastic. Let's say you're playing like a Viking Warlock deck, and you've got, your School of Pyromancy out, and you've got your, Armory out, and you got a Master of Arms sitting there, and you throw in, but he's sitting like 1 square in front of your castle. You could play Winds of the North, and then walk up to the opponent's base, throw like a Might of the Minotaur on him, and just win. Yeah, Winds of the North is that good. This card can win you games. You saw it in my tournament. I won like 3 games with Winds of the North. Winds of the North is great. Play this card, but you have to make sure to play it at the right time. If you don't play it at the right time, it's totally worthless. But play it at the right time, this card wins games. Armory. This has often been compared to... This has also often been compared to Temple of the 5 Gods. Which one is better? Which one do people like better? Which one do you get more utility out of? I like Armory a billion times better than Temple, because Armory gives all of your units +1/+1. Compared to Call to War, Armory just does it for everything. Even units that haven't been played yet, once they get played, they get the +1/+1. When the armory is destroyed, they no longer get the buff. I like Armory a lot better because both buildings give that +1 health. This gives a static +1 attack. So the static +1 attack can be used in offensive purposes as well as defensive purposes. That means units that are attacking enemy units that are attacking your units will take 1 more retaliation damage, and your units will take 1 more damage to kill. So all your units are going to trade up. Think your peasant militias are 2/3s, make them 3/4s with Armory. So your units are all going to trade up. Essentially takes your 1-drop peasant militia, turns it into 2-drop lumberjack and bear. So it takes your 2-drop warrior and turns it into a 3-drop faithful drake. That's essentially the stat buff that you're looking at for Armory. All your units are going to trade up. Once you get to the top level, take your your 6'10 Legionnaire turned into a 7'11 Legionnaire. The one buff is just big. Those of you who've played around with Knight of the Flowers know how big the one attack buff can be, and giving this to everybody all the time, super useful. Compare this to Temple of the Five Gods, which we'll touch on in a minute, that gives Lightning 1. In order to get that Lightning 1, you have to be attacking, so it serves no defensive purpose. Your units won't trade up when being attacked. Your opponent will be equally likely to attack your units unless that one health buff is really the deciding factor. And if that's the case, then both buildings serve the same purpose. Except for Armory would buff your unit's attack, and sometimes that one damage is enough to get there. I like this a lot better. It doesn't chain with poison like the other one does, but that's so situational that Armory is just a better card overall. I like this card. I play it in almost every Viking deck I run. Battlecry gives all your units +3 attack this turn. Can be moderately useful if you're playing the right thing. I like the Ninja iteration of this card better. Although I do like this card better than the Warlock iteration of it. This card's been seen in, most factions. I don't like any of them. Having that many units on the field in position to attack your opponent, generally speaking, Battlecry is going to be a win more card. It's going to deal 3, potentially 6 more damage to your opponent's base, but you're already winning by the time that this becomes an issue. Battlecry can be a nice swing if you're really getting killed, but you do have a bunch of defensive units on the field. Battlecry can make it so all your units trade up. But there's a card that's coming up here shortly that I like a billion times better than this card. I don't play Battlecry. Battle Gear, this is your standard enchantment. This is what all the other enchantments are kind of based on. This is what sets the standard for enchantments. Battle Gear is not that great. There are cards that do the same thing but better even for the same gold cost. So if you don't have anything else but you like the way that the cards work together like that, Battle Gear is where it's at. In very low ranks, this card will get the job done. The higher you move up, the less Battle Gears you're going to see. Once you hit like rank 12, you're probably never going to see a Battle Gear again. But similar to Burn, the way that works in Warlock decks, Battle Gear works in pretty much every other faction. It just sets the standard for what an enchantment does. So 3 gold, 2/2s is the standard. They're going to find ways to decrease the gold cost, increase the buff, and then potentially increase the rarity and add a negative side effect. See Veil of the Assassin. They're going to, find ways to decrease the gold cost, increase the buff, but add a stipulation. See Blessing of the Treants. That kind of stuff. But this is what sets the standard to what's an acceptable enchantment. But don't play it. It's totally useless, but it does have a purpose. Berserker, this card you're going to see in just about every Viking deck that you play. It's a common, so everyone should have it. If you don't have it, buy a pack, shard all the cards, and create Berserker. Berserker's amazing. He has knockback 2, which means he won't take retaliation damage unless you're attacking a ranged unit. He's a 3/4. The stat line's a little bit lacking, but that can be supplemented a little bit with things like Armory. However, the 4/5 units in just about every faction are not great. Ice Drake's not great. Paladin's not great. Thief's not great. So 4/5 is really kind of a bummer stat line. But Berserker, because he does have knockback, he is going to be the most situational one of those. And even at 3 attack, he still does a lot of stuff. Like he kills Rat King without giving Rat tokens. And that's always great. So play Berserker in your Viking decks. You won't be disappointed. There's definitely ways to combo that knockback with some lightning effects and do some silly things. So Berserker should be played in just about all of them. Fantastic defensive unit. He can really put the pressure on in the offense. Play it. Murdrolf's Big Bash, not great. It gives all units 3/3. That means all your units, all your opponent's units, but it gives everything -2 movement, which means all your units and all your opponent's units, which means that they essentially can only move 1 square or not move at all. Why you'd want to play this card, I don't know. If it buffs up all your units, you really need to have some movement buffs like Winds of the North in order to make use of your units, but then you're just moving into your opponent's buff units. I don't like it. It's a permanent buff on everybody, but it just doesn't do anything. I like Harmonic Balance for Ninjas way better. It costs less. The side effect is less. It's just, I almost like Call to War better than this card. I don't like it. Dragon Taming adds 2 Ice Rakes to your hand. This card I thought was going to be way overpowered. I thought this card was going to be the meta-defining card. I thought this card was going to change everything. Ice Drake actually got a debuff when I started bringing up some of the examples of Ice Drake and why this card and Ice Drake combined together is too strong. So I think I was the catalyst for changing Ice Drake and making him a little weaker. Sorry, guys. Ice Drake, I don't know if I'm supposed to say this, but Ice Drake used to have 6 health. Now it only has 5. And I think that was due to this card being a thing. I thought the idea was fine, but being able to pump out that many fat Ice Drakes, I felt like was a little bit too powerful. Adding the Ice Drakes to your hand is fantastic in theory, but since Ice Drake is kind of weak at this point, and I think it should be, I think he's just fine where he's at in that 4-drop, 4-5 stat line with the worst ability ever. But I think adding 2 of those big units to your hand is pretty darn useful. You can obviously buff them up in however you want, but this is kind of going to be your Viking draw tech. The problem is it doesn't draw from your deck; it draws Ice Drakes, and that can be a hindrance at sometimes. Usually, you have to be very careful when you play this card because if you play it at the wrong time, your opponent's just going to run up on you and kill you, and your Ice Drakes aren't going to do anything. So be careful when you play this card, but if played at the right time, it can be very, very helpful for you. I like Rally the Town a lot better than this card, by the way. Fist of the Ancient Hero. I love this card. I think it's great. Sometimes I wish it costed a little bit less. I've heard some arguments as far as that goes. But I think Fist of the Ancient Hero is fantastic. It draws a card. It gives a unit +1 attack, which sometimes can be enough to finish off an opposing unit. It also gives it knockback 5, so your unit's not going to be retaliated against. If you throw this on something like the Wanderer or something like that, you're going to get some serious damage out of it. You can throw it with something with Lightning Blade and knock opponents back into their own castle, and then they'll chain the lightning to their own castle. Very cute. This is really gonna solidify your defenses as Vikings. I think this card should be played all the time. Sometimes it's a little bit less useful than other times, but you're never usually going to be disappointed to play Fist of the Ancient Hero. You just might find sometimes that you're 1 gold short because sometimes it can cost too much, but I think if it was reduced in gold cost, the card would be too strong. So I think it's fine where it's at. I think you should play this card, but just remember to be careful when you play it. Remember when you're playing this card, you're not playing a unit, usually, unless it's really late game. So just be careful. Ice Blast. Terrible. When are they going to decide that dealing 2 damage to anything is not good? This is like Fireball, but worse. This is like Bombardment, but worse. This is like Hail Shot, but worse. This card is not good. Don't play it. Deals 2 damage to an enemy unit and all nearby enemy units, and freezes them. So it slows them down for 1 turn. It just keeps you from getting killed 1 turn longer. Not great. Don't play it. Your opponent's units are already not going to be clumped up anyway because they're worried about lightning effects. So you're really only going to hit 1, maybe 2 units with this, unless your opponent's really poorly positioned. This also doesn't deal castle damage, as opposed to Bombardment that deals 3 damage, and it deals castle damage and building damage, where this doesn't. So this is just a billion times worse than all the other cards in this slot. Even Fireball does more damage. Even though that does deal castle damage, at least 3 can kill something. This will kill rat tokens, and that's in Soulless Lanterns, and that's it. Ice Blast, not great. The slowing effect, not great. The damage, not great. The fact that it doesn't deal castle damage, not great. Just combines to a card that's not great. Don't play it. Ever. Ice Weapon. Compare this to Battle Gear. You might think, oh wow, Ice Weapon's just a strict upgrade, and it is. Because Battle Gear sets the standard for what buffs are. Ice Weapon is an increase in rarity, but it adds an additional effect. Usually that freeze effect's not that useful. If you don't unless you throw this on a unit that has 3 range, the 2 freeze is not going to help you. So you're going to have to throw this on something with 3 range in order to get the maximum value out of it. However, this card used to be good. Now it's not. So don't play it. There's better cards that do better stuff. Insight, this card's unique. I touched on it in the last Viking video, the one that I'm replacing. I'll probably keep them both uploaded. But Insight does a lot of cool stuff. This is not an enchantment, but it is not a buff either. I guess it's a hybrid of the two. This gives +4 attack during your turn and your next turn. Keep in mind that 4 attack sticks around for your opponent's turn. So you can play this, destroy a unit, and if your unit survives, he has a lot more defensive capabilities as well. Your opponent's going to be a lot less likely to attack it because they know that whatever unit attacks it's probably going to die. So you're going to get some decent value out of Insight. I actually think this card should see a little bit more play than it does because of that ability. I think it can be pretty useful. You saw me use it reasonably effectively in the draft that I played. So I think Insight, give it a shot. I think this is better than Ice Weapon. I think it's better than Battle Gear. I think it's better than a lot of cards that do the same thing. So I think Insight is definitely worthy of being played. Lightning Bolt. This is going to be your Rat King killer in Vikings. This deals 3 damage to a target, a building or a unit, and you draw a card. Effectively, this is put in place to revenge kill a unit usually and replaces itself. The 3 damage isn't going to kill a unit on its own, but at least it deals 3 instead of 2, so at least can do something. Sometimes they can finish off a pesky building. Let's say you have a warrior get in for 2 on a building in the castle, and then you can use the lightning bolt to finish off the building, and this replaces itself. The fact that this draws a card makes it pretty useful. The fact that it can deal damage to buildings now makes it a little bit more useful. However, there's going to be a lot of times that you wish this costed 2, but if it costed 2, I think it would be a little bit too strong, and that's kind of the story with Vikings, where you're just 1 gold short always. You can combo with pirates to replace that 1 gold shortness, but you're still going to end up being 1 gold short because you wanted to do other stuff. So again, lightning bolt, not as great as it looks, but you're definitely going to see this even up to top level play. You're going to see lightning bolts, so just keep that in mind. It's not a bad card. It's just not the best card, but it's the best that Vikings have. So take it for what it's worth. Compare this to Dark Bolt, where Dark Bolt deals 2 damage. It costs 1 less, it deals 2 damage, but it can also damage the castle. I honestly think this should be able to damage the castle as well, but that might make Vikings too strong again. So you really need to be careful with the way that you're balancing cards, and that's kind of a testament to the way that it works. So Lightning Bolt, it's not as great as it looks on paper. You're going to wish it costed 2 a lot, but, your draw cards, Vikings don't really have a whole heck of a lot of them. So if you want to draw a card, this is going to be your guy. And like I said, you will see this at top level play. I just think it's a little bit underwhelming. Might of the Minotaur. This card's fantastic. It's always been fantastic. It's still fantastic, and it's always going to be fantastic. Giving you unit +5 attack and knockback 5. Essentially, this is a direct removal spell for units, or it's going to finish off your opponent's base. You can put this on a unit and attack just about anything, and it'll kill it, and your guy will survive because it has knockback 5. You can use this on a unit and run up to the base and deal a ton of damage that your opponent wouldn't be expecting. If we're just counting the Might of the Minotaur damage, assuming that your opponent doesn't have any heals, this deals 1/6 of your opponent's base. Your opponent's health directly to his base, not counting the base attack of whatever unit that you hit. So let's say you put this on a warrior and then hit your opponent's base, you'd be dealing 7 damage. You're looking at over 20% of your opponent's health is gone. So they really need to be careful. Might of the Minotaur is great. I think this should be played in every Viking deck. This is your removal spell, and you're not going to be disappointed when you have to play Might of the Minotaur, especially when you can get value out of it with putting it on something like a warrior. It's right on curve. What that means is Warriors 2, Might of the Minotaurs 3. So it's right on curve. You can get in there and kill 2 units and keep your warrior alive. Very useful. You're going to get a lot of use out of Might of the Minotaur. You should play this card. Sharpened Blade. Let's compare this to our Battle Gear. This gives +2 attack, but it doesn't give the health buff, but it draws a card. So again, keeping that 3 gold 2 attack buff in mind, this is balanced with the other cards. This is another draw card spell for the Vikings. This card sees more play than Battle Gear because they find the 2 attack being more valuable than the 2 defense. And draw card means that this replaces itself, which is useful as well. I think it just doesn't really do enough for the gold cost. You're going to wish this costed 2 a lot of times. But in that case, it would be too strong, so they can't do that. So you really need to be careful when you play this card, but you can't get a lot of value out of it. Again, when are they going to learn that 2 is just not enough? If this gave 3 attack, it would be a lot better. Sheep to the Slaughter. This card's great, but it needs to be played at the right time. Discard a card, give a unit +6 attack, and pulls all enemy units towards your side. So essentially, you're blowing all the enemy units towards you into your big guy to kill them. Or you're using this, moving your opponent, who's got a guy standing in front of his base, away, and then running in and killing him. So Sheep to the Slaughter can be very useful. You can get a ton of value out of this card, especially if you put on something like Cleave, like Warrior or Swordsman, or Ragnar, and you can get a ton of value out of this card. Where if your opponent's setting up an army, you can destroy the entire thing in one shot. Or throw this on a unit with double strike, and you can get in for a ton of damage with this card. It's useful, but you need to use it in the right time. A deck needs to really be built in a certain way to make use of Sheep to the Slaughter. I like Might of the Minotaur better because it doesn't have the downside and not the situational utility of this card. However, if the deck is built properly to really make use of Sheep to the Slaughter, then Sheep to the Slaughter is going to be a better card in that situation. But for the most part, I think Might of the Minotaur is better, although this has higher upside. Touch on Temple of the Five Gods. I already covered this kind of when I touched on the armory. This has a rarity upgrade, so people may think this is better just because it's more rare. That is not the case. I like armory a lot better, but the lightning one that it deals to all the enemies that are connected can be useful, but remember, you have to be attacking in order to take real advantage of this card. If you are not attacking, then it's just an armory without the attack buff. But if you are attacking, Temple of the Five Gods, it's pretty good. It's not a bad card. You play it, you won't really be disappointed with it. But I just think armory is just better. Treant, this is going to be your defensive unit for Vikings. I have a feeling this video is running absurdly long, so I'm so sorry about that. But Treant, this is going to be your defensive unit. If you play Shield Knight and then Treant, that's a Blessing of the Treants on your Treant. You can make this thing a house. However, it does have a really nasty drawback, especially if you're playing against Warlocks or Pirates or Vikings or Ninjas. Pretty much anything that's not Crusaders. This takes 1 damage extra from cards and effects, but not attacks. So this will take 1 extra damage from things like Fireball or Dark Bolt. This will take 1 extra damage from effects like Lightning. But it will not take 1 extra damage in just attack damage or retaliation damage. It'll take 1 extra damage from explosions from School of Pyromancy or even from the standard Pyromancer. But it will not take 1 extra damage for just the regular attack that Pyromancer gives. So keep that in mind with Treant. But he's still a defensive powerhouse. He's going to keep you from getting killed. I really like him in tournament. I like him in constructed. I play Treant almost all the time. Wind Weapon, I like this card in tournament, not so much in constructed. Giving a unit +1 knockback can make a defensive unit really, really strong. Making sure that your opponent's melee units won't retaliate against you is really the point of Wind Weapon. Compare this to our friend the Battle Gear there. It gives one less attack, 1 less defense, but it gives it knockback 1. I think that earns it his slot in and of itself. Being able to knock your opponent's units back, ensuring that you won't be retaliated against, is really valuable. Turns this into an effective removal spell in some situations. So Wind Weapon is definitely more useful. If you're given the choice between Ice Weapon, Wind Weapon, and Battle Gear, I would go with the Wind Weapon in that choice. In tournament, pretty good. In constructed, not so great. Fist of the Ancient Hero is just better. However, you're not going to see Fist of the Ancient Hero in tournament mode as nearly as often as you're going to see this card, so I think this card's better. Aura of Command, compare this to our friend the Battle Gear again. It's another enchantment. However, this has a unique effect. This gives Aura 2. What that means is any unit that's in the vicinity of the unit that you put this on will get +2 attack while it's there. If it moves away out of that aura, then it will no longer get the +2 attack. This card used to be way too strong, and then they nerfed it, and then it was still pretty strong, and then they nerfed it again, and then it was worthless, and then they buffed it to this. So this card's seen a bunch of changes. I think it can be useful in tournament mode, especially in constructed. I don't really see this as being very useful. Generally speaking, your spacing is going to be a lot better, especially at the top level, and you need to watch out when your units are clumped together because there are explosive effects, there are lightning effects that can get too much value out of having your units spread out like that, so or clumped together like that. So just be careful with the Aura of Command. But in tournament, I think it's definitely a viable play. Touch on Gungnir. This is another card that I think is very underwhelming. I always wish that this card costed 1 less when I played it. I wish I could play this on a ranged unit. On both cases, I can't. This card seems a lot better than it actually is. It gives a melee unit +3/+3 in Pierce, so compared to our friend the Battle Gear, it costs 1 more, but it gives +1/+1 extra, and it gives Pierce, which means it'll allow your unit to hit an additional target. If you throw this on something that already has Pierce, like Legionnaire Guardian, it'll hit 3 units in a row, and it'll hit 3 squares. Let me rephrase that. It'll hit 3 squares in a horizontal row, but not all 3 squares need to be occupied. Obviously, the target that you attack has to be occupied, but there can be a gap in the middle, and then another unit or castle behind it, and it'll hit both of those units. The Pierce affects the squares on the board, not the units on the field. So keep that in mind when you play Gungnir. If you're playing other Pierce units, it can be a problem. Generally speaking, I don't like it. I just find it very underwhelming. I think it just costs too much, but I think if it costed 3, it would be too strong. So Gungnir is another card that is just underwhelming. I wish it costed 1 gold less, but if it cost 1 gold less, it would be too strong. And where it is today, I just don't think it's that great. I'd rather play Might of the Minotaur and just get some serious damage in, or another card that we're going to touch on later. Ice Drake, this is your standard 4/5 body for 4. Most of the other factions have one of these. Ice Drake's not great. The effect is actually moderately useful anyway. It'll freeze a unit, so throwing this in front of something like the Ranger. The Ranger won't be able to run away as far if it kills an Ice Drake. So body blocking with Ice Drakes can be reasonably useful. They also they're fortunate enough to be Drakes, so you will be able to buff them with things like Dragon Temple, and you can dig for them with that other card I covered earlier. Dragon Taming, thank you. You can bring these out with Dragon Taming. You're going to see a lot of these. It's just the 4/5 for 4 is just not a great stat line. 3/6s, things like Shield Knight will trade with an Ice Drake, which is kind of a bummer for Ice Drake. So it is what it is. But I don't think he's bad. I think that if he had the 1 extra health, he would be too strong. He's not horribly weak. He can be buffed up, but he's not the best Drake. He's not the worst Drake. I think he's right in the middle there, and he's not terrible. So play him if you've got him. If you're playing a Drake strategy, but if you're not, I would build around him just because the 4/5 for 4 hasn't been that great in the past, and it's not that great now. Ice Weaver, this is a card that for a long time was a staple in Vikings. I think this is what made Vikings work. Now he's worthless. Him only having 2 range and 2 movement, but he freezes for 2, means that any unit that he hits will just, unless it has less than 3 movement by default, will just be able to run up to him and kill him. Ice Weaver used to be so great. Now he is just not great. You have to throw a buff on him to make him useful, to make him what he was. Even then, at 2 range, he's not even as good. Ice Weaver is just so sad. This card used to be so awesome. He was like my favorite card. I was so excited when I finally got my first Ice Weaver. I couldn't wait to play Ice Weaver. I was ecstatic to have Ice Weaver, and now he's not good. And I'm so sad that they changed him. And I don't think they had any reason to do it. Maybe one of the developers got beat by an Ice Weaver too bad, and he was just pissed off and changed him. I don't know what happened, but please bring my Ice Weaver back. I'm never gonna get rid of this guy because he used to be my favorite card, and now he's just awful. Ice Weaver, I miss you. Don't play Ice Weaver. Master of Arms. This is a card that you should play. This card's really good. He comes in as a 4/4, so he gets his own buff. He buffs everything else on the field by one attack. He also has double strike. Keep in mind that double strike is almost always going to be used on the base. You'll almost never be able to use it on 2 units because since units will retaliate against Master of Arms, he usually get killed before he gets a chance to attack the other one. But you need to watch out anytime that this guy hits the field. Because he can be hit with something like Battle Harden right away, turn into a 7/7, and then you really, really need to watch out. This card can be a serious threat, so be very careful. Make sure you deal with him when you see him. But if you're playing Vikings, you should definitely play this guy. He's pretty good. Tower of Ice. This card used to be so overpowered it was broken. Now they made it basically worthless. The freeze effect doesn't do anything. Ice Weaver was really the only one that could take advantage of it. Now they don't. Now they can't, and it sucks. Tower of Ice used to deal 1 damage to every unit the instant that it hit the battlefield, and freeze it for 2 the instant that it hit the battlefield. So you wouldn't be able to run your units up right away. They would be stuck, and you used to not be able to place units in the corner. Only the 3 units directly behind your base, which made them perfect targets for lightning. And then you could just set up an Ice Weaver and just lightning the opponent's castle with your Ice Weaver. Keep all your opponent's enemy units frozen right where they're at, make it so they can't move, and just win. Tower of Ice, the 2 movement would be temporary, but it'd be over before it actually mattered. Tower of Ice was so overpowered, now it's totally worthless. Freezing a random enemy unit, you don't even have control over what it hits, and it doesn't even do anything, or remove it, or damage it at all. Where at least with Tower of Fire, it can deal damage to the castle, and it also can kill units, where this doesn't do either. Don't play it. Battering Ram is a card that makes seem kind of cute. It has super high burst damage capabilities, being able to do 21 damage, potentially 28 damage if the castle's been moved. Can be significantly useful. However, you'll mostly find that you'll be dealing 7 damage to a unit for 5, which is way too much. Way more than what you should be playing with this card. However, it is pretty cute to set up some combos and smash your opponent's face with this. So you might have fun doing that, and I guess that's what the game's all about, having fun, right? So keep that in mind when you play this card. You're just generally going to find it to be underwhelming. Your opponent's not going to let you get 3 units around their base in order to deal a ton of damage. And if you do get 3 units around your opponent's base, you're probably already winning anyway, and you don't need Battering Ram. But just keep it in mind. You can build around this. You can kind of make some cute combo-y tech decks, but you're just going to wish this is something else almost every single time. Battle training, giving all your units +2/+2. Compare this with our other friend there. It just gives this to all units, permanent. This card used to require discard and cost less. Now they increase the cost and don't require the discard anymore. You're not able to storm out as many units as you were before either, so this card lost its usefulness. Even putting battle gear on a peasant militia, turning a 2/3 into a 4/5 can be fairly useful. Doing that to a ton of units at the same time can also be fairly useful. However, you're gonna wish this is something else almost every time you play it, so don't. Blizzard. When are they going to realize that dealing 2 damage to everything is not useful, and freezing things is not useful anymore either? This card's not good. Don't play it. I don't know why people think this card's good. I don't know why people play this card. 2 damage doesn't kill anything except for rat tokens and soulless lanterns, and freezing their units is just going to keep you from getting killed 1 turn sooner. So Blizzard, don't play it. You aren't missing anything. This card used to be a rare. They bumped it to legendary and didn't change it at all. I'm sorry, they didn't bump it to legendary. They bumped it to epic and didn't change it at all. And it sucked then, and it sucks now. Cycle of Domination. I like Minotaur a lot better than this. This has one distinct feature. This is another draw card for Vikings. They don't have a lot of them. However, this doesn't give knockback like the Might of the Minotaur does, so you're not going to get nearly as much use out of this one as you would the other one, because your unit's going to die anyway, and you don't want a 2-for-1 with your opponent, even though this does replace itself. You're going to find this, you're going to wish this was a Might of the Minotaur, because Might of the Minotaur also costs 2 gold less. This costs too much gold. If they reduce the gold cost, I think this card might be too strong. In this current iteration, totally worthless, don't play it. You're going to wish it was the next card. This card is the most overpowered, ridiculous card in the game right now. This card's so strong. This card is the reason why people play Vikings. This card is the reason why Vikings win games. This card's the reason why Vikings are as awesome as they are. If this card wasn't what it is, then Vikings would be basically useless. Lightning Blade is the reason to play Vikings. It's so good. Chaining 5 units to 5 damage to everything in a chain. Fantastic. Kills all buildings. Hits the castle for 5. Kills most units. Deals tons of damage. Super useful. Play this card. You won't be disappointed. You'll be super happy you have it. Play 2 of every time in Vikings. Always play 2 Lightning Blades. You won't hear me say that about any other card in any other set, but in Vikings, always play 2 Lightning Blades. All the time. All the time. There's just not enough good things to say about this card. There's just not. This card could cost 8, and I think I would still play Lightning Blade. 2 of in every Viking deck. So good. So good. Aeroth. This is a card that you need a bunch of drakes for to make it useful. This is probably the weakest of the dragons, other than Wotan, but I don't even think Wotan really counts in his current form. Aeroth, you need drakes to make him useful. You need to have a strong board presence in order to really get the value out of Aeroth. And if you have such a strong board presence, you probably don't need Aeroth. It gives all your drakes knockback, which is pretty useful, and also gives them an additional attack. However, the body's pretty good as well. At 6, you're gonna kind of wish he had a little bit more attack power than 4. Compare this to Swordsman, he has essentially the same stats, but he has a different buff, and Swordsman has Cleave. I'll take the Swordsman over the Aeroth. It's your call. Yeah. Oh, my wife sent me a picture. Or something. I want to finish this so I can go to bed. I love you, boo. Alright, this is it's an I love you shirt in Disneyland writing. Alright, this is Barbarian. God, I love her so much. This is Barbarian. He has double strike, similar to Master of Arms, but he has a little bit bigger of a body. This card's great just the way he is. He hasn't seen any changes since I've played this game, I don't think. Barbarian's fantastic where he's at. You give him some movement buffs, get some serious damage on the castle. You can kill 2 units at once because that 6 butt allows him to do it. He has 5 attacks, so he can also take out some units as well. Definitely worth playing Barbarian in Vikings. You might not include him in every deck, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. You may choose to play something like Swordsman over Barbarian, and I think that's a valid play. I think either one is really, you're going to be okay going either direction. Barbarian's very good. It's going to allow you to get a lot of that damage on your opponent's castle that you want to. It's going to let you get maximum effectiveness out of a lot of the buffs and enchantments that Vikings play. That's kind of their forte. So Barbarian's fantastic. Definitely a card that you should play. I'm just ready to go. Am I almost done? Yes. Ragnar. This card, the only thing this card changed from when it jumped from rare straight to legendary is it was knockback was added. Other than that, he's exactly the same. He's been around for forever. The knockback is pretty effective. The way he works, he deals 1 damage to a unit, he knocks it back, and then deals 2 to anything that's chained after it already gets knocked back. From what I found, there's a glitch or an error or a bug or something like that where the lightning doesn't go in both directions. So I actually lost a game once where I played a Ragnar and I ran it in between 2 units where there was a guy directly in front of and a guy directly behind Ragnar. And I attacked the unit that was in front of Ragnar, and he hit both units, knocked them both back, but only the one that I actually targeted for the attack got the lightning. Even though with Great Cleave, the attacks also strike enemies behind it, so it hit the one behind it, and when it knocked it back, that one didn't receive lightning. That sucked, and I lost a game from it because there was a bunch of rat tokens that I was trying to kill that were like on my base and ready to kill me. But Ragnar didn't kill them, and I was very sad when it knocked the units at him back toward my base and didn't kill any of those units. And then it died, and I was upset. But Ragnar's useful. Play him all the time. Throwing an enchantment on this guy, throwing something like evasive maneuvers or Bringel's Blessing on Ragnar are going to make him a real house. That 11 health is nothing to sneeze at either. It makes him very difficult to deal with. However, the one attack makes him easy to attack as well. Generally, usually a more defensive unit than an offensive unit, but if you're leading a charge with Ragnar, you're generally going to get through to whatever you're trying to attack, as well as that lightning is going to be able to spread to everything. Keep in mind the lightning 2 is totally worthless. You're going unless it adds up. But with Ragnar, it's going to be difficult to do because people try to kill him very quickly. Not the strongest legendary, but not the weakest one either. Winds of the Njord. People thought this card was way overpowered, and now people almost don't play this card anymore. It used to cost 4, now it costs 6, so be grateful for that. We found it was a little bit too strong in the 4 spot. Generally speaking, you're going to need to have a clear board in order to make real use of Winds of the Njord. So it just pulls all enemies, including the castle, 2 spaces towards your side, so you can really take advantage of having your opponent's castle in the way of their rush. But without a clear board, you're just going to be inviting enemies to your face. And since it costs 6, you're not really going to be able to play anything else of substance at the same time that you play Winds of the Njord. So be careful with this card, but you can pull off some really creative and new unique combinations with this card that you wouldn't be able to see with a lot of other things. So keep that in mind. It's definitely useful. Dragon Bolt, I'm actually going to build a deck that has Dragon Bolt in it as well. Deals 5 damage to anything, unit, base, unit, castle, building, whatever. And it replaces itself, another draw card, but it costs 7. You might think that's too much, and it probably is, but I think if this costs less, it would be too strong. So that's really the theme with Viking, is if a card costs less, it would be too strong. But Dragon Bolt to get the job done, especially in tournament if you don't have anything better to pick. Generally speaking, the epic slot, you're going to have at least something better to pick. Maybe a Central Golem, maybe a Knight of Flowers, maybe a Cleric, maybe anything else, probably. So this is one of the weaker epic cards that you could possibly pick. I'll probably take this over a multi-strike. But that 5 damage can definitely get you there, so you need to be careful. People won't play around this card either. So take it for what it's worth. Dragon Bolt can be useful, needs to be built around, does cost a lot, but late game it can get you there. All right, 2 cards left. This is Triple Strike. I think this card's fantastic. I play one of these in just about every single Viking deck that I build. People don't usually play around Triple Strike either, especially if you only got like 1 units on the field. Then you play Winds of the North and move a big unit to your opponent's base, and then Triple Strike it to death. Another thing I like doing is you can have a small unit, and then you can play Might of the Minotaur and Triple Strike on the same turn and just win. So Triple Strike is a card that will get you the win basically on its own. You need a unit to hit with this, obviously, but once you get a unit up into your opponent's base, even a 5 attack unit will turn into dealing 15 damage on your opponent's base with Triple Strike. So Triple Strike effectively deals 10 damage in that situation. So this card's fantastic. I would not recommend playing 2 of these ever, because you end up just 1 being a dead card in your hand because you only need 1 to finish off your opponent's base, and you only really play one in a turn anyway. But Triple Strike is great. Play this card, you won't be disappointed. Very good. And then we'll touch on the last card that we're going to touch on today. This is Brynjolf. This is the hero for Vikings. This is the reason that if you're going to play Mono Vikings, this is the card that you're... Whoa. I'm sorry. I just read his description. They changed it. They added a keyword, which makes me think they're going to be adding more cards that do the same ability, which excites me and terrifies me at the same time. He has knockback 5, which means he won't take retaliation damage from just about anything. When played, he gains +3 movement, which means he comes into play with 6 movement, so he can hit your opponent's base the turn he comes into play. And unstoppable this turn, which means I'm expecting there to be additional unstoppable cards if they took the time to add a keyword for that specific ability. That kind of excites me a little bit, also terrifies me. But after slaying an enemy unit, it gets another movement and attack. So you can move, kill a unit, 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 move, hit the base. So essentially this will kill just about everything on the field as long as the 7 attack is enough to kill the opponent. It can kill anything with 7 or less health and hit the base, all in the same turn. So essentially board wipe. This card's fantastic. This card's of the hero cards, this one's been through the most changes by far. He's definitely seen his fair share of iterations. This one is definitely a useful iteration. Super good, but generally speaking, not overpowered because the 7/7 stat line is a little bit lacking, especially in the late game. A lot of opponents, especially if you're playing against a Crusader deck, are going to have more than 7 health. So the usefulness of Brynjolf is going to be a little bit neutered, and you're also not going to be able to play more than one of him, which is really a bummer. It's too bad you can't combine with his ninjas and bounce it and do all sorts of crazy Brynjolf-y things. But you can't do that anymore. But this card's definitely worthy of being played. If you're going to go mono Vikings, you're doing it to play Brynjolf, and he earns his reputation as being the ancient hero. Alright, so there's my my breakdown of the Vikings. Sorry this video ran exorbitantly long. I am ready for bed. I'm going to get this video uploading and go to sleep. I have to go to work tomorrow, and I got to be there in less than 12 hours. So I was going to make dinner for my wife, but I'm probably not going to do that tonight. Because I had to work late already, and now I'm just getting home, and it's just a giant pain in the butt, and I don't feel like doing it. Don't judge me. But, again, keep in mind that stuff that I covered at the beginning of the video. Like, comment, subscribe, tell me what you think. Sorry, this video probably ran for like an hour and a half. My bad. I'm going to go home. I'm going to walk inside. I'm going to go to sleep, and I'm going to be super happy about it. We'll see you guys in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.